the last time the Oklahoma Sooners won in Lubbock against Texas Tech, Wes Welker was playing for the Red Raiders, and Tommy Harris and Derek Strait were both Sooners, and it was Jason White's Heisman Trophy winning season. Yeah, you got to think back 9 years ago when Adrian Peterson and Michael Crabtree, they were both in high school at the time. 2003, that's the last time the Sooners won in Lubbock. And since then, it's been absolute misery in West Texas for the Sooners. They've lost their last 3 games there, including 2009, in which they got their butts kicked. And I can't put my finger on it as far as why Lubbock is such kryptonite to the Oklahoma Sooners. But the one thing I do know, OU needs to win and needs to win big time on Saturday. They need a victory in the worst way after that disappointment against Kansas State. For a team that was ranked so high at the beginning of the year, 4th in the country was OU, you have to wonder if they lose on Saturday, if it's going to be a pretty long season. I'll dive into that subject in just a little bit. But the Sooners, of course, last week didn't play. They had the bye week. And anytime you go into a bye week after a loss, the Kansas State game, for example, that bye week seems like 2 or 3 weeks long. In other words, it just seemed like the week kept dragging on and on and on, primarily because I'm sure the Sooners, coaches and players, they kept hearing from the fans, from the media, those questioning Oklahoma as far as the state of the program right now. No question the Kansas State game, even though K-State played well, the Sooners missed out on some opportunities in that game, and it came back to bite them. Of course, the 3 turnovers didn't help either. So some people, I'm sure, are saying, has Oklahoma run the cycle? In other words, are their best days behind them? You wouldn't think so. You would just like to think that the game against Kansas State was just one of those things where the Sooners beat themselves. But if you date back to last year and the Texas Tech loss at home, this is really when the doubts began to creep in. The Baylor loss, losing that game, and then getting shellacked by Oklahoma State. And that team, that OU team, was second in the country and ended up with a 10-3 record. And it just seems like lately, the last few years, the Sooners have started off so high, a national championship contender. And even though they have been able to, like 2010, they got the 12-2 season. But in 2009, the injuries and plus just lack of consistency led to an 8-5 record. So it's been since 2008 since the Sooners have been able to live up to the hype. Now, for the Sooners, in my opinion, to get back to being where they need to be, which is a highly successful program, they've got to fix several things. It's not just a magic pill. It's not just one component. It's several things. I think the biggest thing, the number one thing for Oklahoma, if they are still going to have a successful season and somehow find a way to win the Big 12, number one, they've got to be on the same page. Even Josh Heupel himself, the offensive coordinator, after the K-State loss, said that we're not all on the same page right now. Big troublesome sign because the offense relies on up-tempo. They rely on running as many plays as possible during the game, so you have to run those plays at a high speed. In other words, once the play's over, everybody at the line of scrimmage, everybody knows what they're supposed to do, snap the ball, let's go. Well, that's not happening, and you saw in the K-State game, the Sooners burned so many timeouts unnecessarily on both sides of the ball. They could have used those timeouts at the end of the game because K-State ran the clock out in that 24-19 Wildcat win. It starts in practice, in my opinion. If these guys aren't on the same page in a game, it's a reflection of how they're preparing for the game. Landry Jones, after the K-State loss, said, we need to practice better. That's another alarming sign. Their preparation right now stinks. It's got to be crisp. And there's no excuse. There was no excuse for the K-State game because they had 2 weeks to get prepared. There's no excuse for this week because you have 2 weeks to prepare for the Red Raiders. The Sooners will win or lose this game in Lubbock this Saturday, in my opinion, before Saturday even gets here. It's all about how you prepare, because if you know your assignment, if you know what you're supposed to do, it's going to translate to that field. I don't care if you're playing in Norman or if you're playing in Lubbock. It doesn't matter where you play. If you're prepared, you should be just fine. If not, then the same mistakes, then burning timeouts unnecessarily and having missed assignments are going to repeat themselves, and that's going to lead to a lot of trouble. So they got to be on the same page. Another thing, in my opinion, for the Sooners, they've got to get pressure on the quarterback. This is a big difference so far from what I've seen in this year's defense as opposed to last season's. Last season, they got to the quarterback. Last season against K-State, they got to Colin Klein I don't know how many times. And they won the game easily. That was a big reason why. They didn't get to Colin Klein one time on Saturday. in on the Saturday the 22nd. As a matter of fact, Colin Klein in that game was able to drop back in the pocket. He could have built a campfire singing Kumbaya and then thrown the ball, completed the pass, and then smiled at you in the process. It was that easy for him because the defensive line's not getting to the quarterback. So they need to do something different in that department because QB pressure has been a big trademark for OU the last few years, and so far we haven't seen it. No sacks against K-State in the last game. I think another thing, Landry Jones has got to get it back. And I don't know what the coaching staff can do for Jones because he did not play well at all in that last game on September the 22nd. The mistakes that he made, throwing the football, also handling the football on that fumble that K-State recovered for a touchdown. He's got to be more of a leader. He's got to be a little bit more vocal because if the quarterback's down, then that could be a reflection of the offense because the quarterback should be the leader. So we'll see. Landry Jones, I still think, has the tools of being a fine quarterback, and we've seen him play well. I mean, last year against Texas, against that terrific defense, he was completing passes. He was shredding Texas defense, and he was doing it under a lot of pressure. So I don't want people saying he stinks. He's a bad quarterback. He's not a bad quarterback. He's had some bad games, though. He's had more good games than bad games. That's how we know he's a good quarterback. But he needs a good performance in Saturday against Texas Tech in order to get some confidence back because he kind of reminds me of Tony Romo of the Cowboys. When things go well for the Cowboys. But when Romo doesn't do well, then it seems to have a domino effect. So we'll see how Landry Jones responds after a mediocre performance on the 22nd. And I think another thing, too, talking about Oklahoma, they've got to get some push up front from the offensive line. Another big difference between the Sooners of now and the early Bob Stoops years were those offensive lines. They've got to be able to push those defenders back. They've got to be able to sustain blocks. And the offensive line, I know you don't have Evans. I know you don't have Hayburn. There should still be enough quality linemen on that front in order to get the job done. So offensive line's got to do their part. And they'll need to go in against a Texas Tech team that right now is undefeated. They're at 4-0, coming off a Big 12 opening victory against Iowa State. Again, with Texas Tech, you're going to get a lot of passing. Seth Doege, last year, you remember he came to Norman, and he picked Oklahoma apart. He's back. A lot of those receivers are back, too. Eric Ward's back. Moore's back. Darren Moore. Alex Torres only caught one pass last week against Iowa State. Didn't matter because Tech still won the game. But Torres has torched Oklahoma twice in his career. So you wonder, what he's going to play like this Saturday. Matter of fact, if you look at Texas Tech's game against Iowa State, Doege distributed the ball quite well, completed passes to 10 different receivers, and he completed at least 4 passes to 4 different receivers. So he does distribute the ball quite well. Oklahoma will have to get pressure on him. There's no question about it. You can't just rely on your defensive backs because Tech has a plethora of receiving options. The big talk for Tech this year has been the defense, though. The defense right now is number 1 in the Big 12 in both total D and pass D. Of course, what's the catch? Well, they've played Northwestern State, Texas State, as well as New Mexico and Iowa State. Those offenses aren't going to set the world on fire whatsoever. Granted, Art Kaufman has done a good job as first-year defensive coordinator at Texas Tech. They also have a new defensive line coach and a new secondary coach. But you could already see some differences being made on that Tech defense. They got out of that 4-2-5 that Chad Glasgow ran for the Red Raiders last year, and they got torched. Even in the Oklahoma win last year, where they beat the Sooners by 3 points, they still gave up 38 points in the process. So you can already see some improvement there, but I'm not about to say that Texas Tech has a great D because they haven't really faced any competition yet. Next week, they'll get West Virginia. Of course, they get OU this Saturday, and then they close out the year with Oklahoma State and Baylor, 2 dynamic offenses. So it is yet to be seen if Texas Tech D has come full circle, has made that 180 turn, and has been able to show that their defense is just as strong as the offense. We still don't know yet because of what they faced, but at least so far, we've seen them play more aggressive on the line, and we've seen the defensive backs play tighter, so we'll see how the receivers for Oklahoma do against those guys. Cody Davis has gotten off to a good start at his safety spot for the Red Raiders, already a couple of picks, and he's also one of the team's leading tacklers. Now, let's go ahead and quickly highlight the 4 keys to this Saturday's game. Number 1, Landry, get on track. We've already mentioned earlier. I think this will be one of those games where the coaching staff has him throw some high percentage passes. In other words, nothing too risky, nothing deep over the middle. And if they can, if the Oklahoma coaching staff can put Landry in situations to where he can pick up some confidence, then I think that will go a long way on Saturday. So we'll see how Landry handles the Lubbock environment. Number 2, also for Oklahoma, conversely, they have to force Seth Doege into some mistakes. Doege did throw for 3 touchdowns last week, but he also threw an interception that got ran back for a touchdown. So Tech is turnover prone. And then key number 3, the third down battle. Tech's done a little bit better in this area on the offensive side than Oklahoma. Tech has converted more than half of their third down conversions. OU less than half at 16 of 36. So third down conversions, a big key to sustaining drives, getting more points, and in Oklahoma's case, more importantly, keeping that Tech offense on the sideline as much as they can. And then key number 4, the takeaway department. OU has only forced 1 turnover so far. They didn't force any against Kansas State, and that has to change. You're playing on the road. You can get those turnovers, especially early. You can negate some of that crowd advantage in Lubbock. So let's see how OU does in the takeaway department. Tech, I think they're around even so far in the takeaway giveaway department, but the Sooners right now are the worst team in the conference when it comes to the takeaway margin. Final thoughts on this game. Lubbock has not been an easy place for OU to play. It won't be easy this Saturday, but rarely in the Bob Stoops era do they lose back-to-back games. You have to go back to 2006, the last time OU lost back-to-back ball games. That was Oregon, the host job there, and then losing to Texas the following week. It's been 6 years since they've had an actual losing streak. I think the Sooners know what's at stake. It won't be easy. It'll actually be a pretty competitive game, but I look for OU in the fourth quarter to have just enough to get past Texas Tech. I'll go 34-28. The Sooners, I think they barely cover that 5-point spread. They get a victory, and they get some much-needed momentum entering the Red River Shootout against Texas on October the 13th. Got to take care of business in Lubbock, and I think they finally find enough to get the job done in Lubbock this time. Don't forget about my college football pick show. That's going to be on Thursday. That's going to be on Thursday, October the 4th, in which I pick against the spread, me and the coin. And then my post-game show of OU Texas Tech on October 6th, the day of the OU Texas Tech game. It may not be right after the game's over. It'll be sometime, though, that Saturday evening. So bank on it. I've got OU winning 34-28. Should be a good game in Lubbock. Boomer Sooner.